Alright, after our previous slides, you probably know a whole lot about classes. Well, maybe you don't, but you probably have a whole lot of notes about classes. You may not really understand what they mean or how they work, but after you see some examples, they should start making sense. Or at least start making better sense, enough to where you can start doing your projects. So, what we're going to do in this video and possibly the next video is we're going to do an example about a rectangle class. We're going to make a rectangle class called myRectangle, which stores a width, a height, an area, and a perimeter for a rectangle. Then we're going to create another file, main, that creates multiple rectangles and displays their properties. And I'm going to go through a lot of iterations showing you why we do specific things with objects. So, first thing we're going to do is we're going to make our project for our rectangle. And I'm going to go to desktop and create a new folder. The first step to creating a folder is usually to make a folder for the files that are going to be part of this project. Rectangle example. I'm leaving the folder empty. I'm not putting any Java code in it. Now I'm going to go to JCreator. And in JCreator, I'm going to go to File, New, Project. Empty Java project. So I'm choosing to make an empty project. And then I need to navigate here, and I need to find that folder I just made. For me, it's on Tully, Desktop, Rectangle Example, and I say OK. This is going to build my project. Once it builds my project, I don't really see anything. It doesn't look like it created anything for me. So if you get this view, we need to go to View, File View. And this is going to show us all the files in our project. Notice it says Rectangle Example. So up here is the name of our project, and here is our project. So the first thing I need, I'm going to do two files in this project. First file I'm going to do, and notice I'm right-clicking New Project, empty Java file, and I'm going to make main file. So this is going to be a class that just has main. Then I'm going to need a second file. This file is going to define what a myRectangle is. myRectangle. So I have main and I have myRectangle. I'm going to start off with just doing the skeleton for a class. Public class myRectangle. And like I said, classes aren't required to have anything, so I press compile and it's happy. This class is pretty useless currently. I'm going to make two pieces of data. Well, I'm going to make all four pieces of my data. Public int width, public int height, public int area, public int perimeter. So here are four pieces of data. Now I'm going to go ahead and write two constructors and we'll get into the example. So my first constructor is public, the name of the file, which is myRectangle. If you just say you want to create a rectangle, I'm going to set the width equal to the height, equal to the width, equal to the perimeter, and I'm going to set that equal to 1. You may not have seen code like this before. What it's going to do is the width equals the height, the width equals the height equals the area equals the perimeter equals 1. This sets all four values equal to 1. On the next version, I'm going to say myRectangle int width, comma, int height. And now, in this method, there are two variables named width. The one that is the attribute up here, and the parameter. There are two variables named height. The one that is the parameter, and the attribute. When I want to access the attribute, I say this dot width equals width. When I want to access the attribute, I say this dot width. When I want to access the parameter, the value they sent me, I say width. So I'm changing the attribute to whatever value they sent. I'm changing the height equal to whatever value they sent. Now, when I say area, I do not have to say this dot area, because at this point there aren't two areas. There's only one area. So width, the area is width times height. When I do the perimeter is width times 2 plus height times 2. Alright, and this is a basic starter for my rectangle class. It's going to become much more advanced. But if I press compile, it's all happy about this. So we're going to go over to the main file, and we're going to get this started real quick. Public class, main, file, curly brace, public static void main string bracket bracket args. First thing I want to do is create a rectangle. My rectangle R1 equals new my rectangle. And if we go over here, this is going to create a rectangle. It'll have a width, a height, and an area of 1 because we're calling the default constructor, and we wrote our default constructor to set everything to 1. We're going to actually test to make sure that's valid in a little bit. Now we're going to do my rectangle R2 equals new my rectangle. And we're going to do 4, 5. Now, I'm going to print off all the data for both rectangles, so it's going to take a while. So I'm going to do system.out.println, and I'm just going to say R1 data. The user doesn't know what R1 is, but y'all can see what R1 is because y'all can see the code. So system.out.println, and now I'm going to print off everything about it. What's the width? Well, it's going to be R1.width. I can access the variable like this because it's public. That means I have free access to it outside of the rectangle file. So I'm just going through real quick. The height is equal to R1.height. The area equals R1 area. The perimeter is equal to R1 perimeter. And now I want to line these things up so they look a little pretty. So let's do hyphen. So I'm left aligning these just because that's real quick and easy. So let's go ahead and compile this. And we're not printing anything about R2, but down here it says R1 data. The width is 1. The height is 1. The area is 1. The perimeter is 1 because we use the default constructor. I'm going to copy and paste this because I'm trying to save time and I'm a programmer, so I'm lazy. So R2, and now we want to print everything about the second rectangle. Notice in main I only created 2 variables. I created R1, R2, but I have access to 8 variables because R1 has 4 pieces of data. R2 has 4 different pieces of data. When I run this, it tells me everything about R1. Ew, that looks a little ugly. Let's put some spaces in between it. \n, \n. So let's run that one more time. So now we can scroll up and see the R1 data, which is still the same. But R2 data is 4, 5, because we passed 4 and 5. The first thing it receives is the width, then the height. And it calculates the area and the perimeter for us. And that's area is 20 and the perimeter is 18. And that's all being calculated because in the constructor it says, you send me a width and a height, I will take those values. Then I will calculate the area and perimeter. So it did the math for us just by calling the constructor. Now this is really awesome. Now, what I want to show you is a little problem that we're going to run into. Everything's great. We have public access. That's why I can access these variables really easily. So we all know our data is good. Now, what I want to do is Control C, Control V, R2 data after change. So what I want to do is I want to just do something real simple. R2 has has a height of 5 and a width of 4. Maybe I want to change the height. So R2 dot height equals 20. All of this is perfectly fine because height is public and everyone has free access to it. So R2 dot height equal 20. Now we're going to run our program again. Notice R2 data is 4/5/2018, which looks beautiful. But then after the change that I just did, R2 data is 4/20, which that makes sense because we changed the height to 20, but the area is still 20 and 18. The area should be 80. The perimeter should be 48. These changes, like the area and the perimeter, didn't change. They should have changed, but they didn't. The reason why is the only place our area and perimeter are set to change is in the constructor. Since we have free access to change any variable we want, if we change the height, the program doesn't know to change the area. It doesn't know to change the perimeter. Now our data is all wrong. This is why we're typically not going to make variables public. Because when we make a variable public, we have free access to change something. When we have free access to change something, we can change it, and maybe that might cause problems for other data. Or maybe we need to know that there was a change. So we're not going to be using public for most of our attributes. We're going to be using private. So we're going to go over here, and we're going to change this to private. Private. I'm going to copy and paste. Now notice when I press compile, this file is fine. But now when I go back to main, I get all kinds of errors. Error, R1 has private access. That means you don't have free access to it. You can't just say R1.width. Down here we can't change it. We can't say R2.height. This is the beautiful thing about private. You take away other people's access. They can't just change a variable if they want to. They can't just say, hey, R2, I'm changing your height to 20. That no longer flies. But if you notice, we would like our code to actually work. Right now this doesn't seem to work very well because we can't access any of our data. So this is where accessors come into play. Accessors allow people to only view data. So we're going to go back to my rectangle, and we're going to write an accessor for each private piece of data because we would like public ways for other files to request access to a variable. So public int get width. So we talked about the accessors before. You put whatever type of variable it is. Width is an int. Then you put get width, and you capitalize it because it's the second word, and you return width. So this code is great. Control C. I'm going to be lazy. This is a video. You can pause it if you want to see it. So get width, get height, returns height, get area, returns area, get perimeter, returns perimeter. Notice when I wrote get width, I didn't say this.width. At this point in code, there's only one variable named width. We do not need to say this.width. It's clear when we say width, we're talking about the attribute because that's the only variable that exists at this point. So now in main, we wrote our accessors. Let's press compile. Boom! It still doesn't work. So that is unfortunate. So what we're going to do is we actually have to use the accessor. Writing the accessor doesn't make that variable public. It means that you're allowed to use this other method to retrieve its value. So this should be get width. This should be get height. This should be get area. This should be get perimeter. And these are methods. I'm going to be lazy to create the second one, and I'm going to go ahead and get some of our code. Right now I just want to display everything again. I don't want to try to change something. We'll get to that later. So R2 data, R2, 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 R2. Compile. Alright, it all compiles. I'm about out of time.